So let's see. First of all, I'm Dave Richo. I'm a therapist in private practice, and this class is called Growing Pains and Growing Up. My book is called How to Be an Adult, and I suggest that you read the first chapter for next time, and then just kind of move through it along with what we're doing, because this will give you the background to our overall subject. The subject of this course is how your early life affects your adult relationships. And I'll give you a quick overview of what we'll be looking at. We talk about our emotional needs. We'll look at some of those basic needs tonight and their characteristics. We talk about mirroring and attunement, whether you can love someone that you control, shame, what we mean by good enough parenting, what is a holding environment, the deprivation that we experienced in early life but denied, the silent scream that might be inside us, our fear of our feelings, how our early life issues relate to loss, what happens to us in adult intimate relationships when our needs were mostly not met in childhood or were mostly met, and how to tell when the needs were met or not met, what the sexual fallout from that would be, what the difficulty with higher power would be from that, how it affects your relationship to money, how it affects whether you would tolerate abuse in relationships, where do the unmet needs go, given that you have any, and how to tell if your family was functional. Something about addictive relationships. I won't spend too much time on that. How to tell when issues that come up in your relationship are related to early life experiences or are really about the present. Exactly how we grow up, what emotional survival is, the distinction between the true self and the false self, and then the most important thing, which is how to do the grief work, because if your needs were not met in childhood, as most of ours weren't, we can't get them fulfilled by other adults. We can only grieve the losses of the past rather than continue to make the futile and desperate attempts to get from other adults what we missed from our parents. Best bet is to let go of all of that. See if you could free yourself so that you could move from the realization of the grief that's inside you. And only this week I was thinking about my own grief, and I suddenly came up with this metaphor, which I'd like to share, that whenever you grieve something that's really important, like the lack of true need fulfillment in childhood, for instance, no matter how well you do the grief work, it will always leave some kind of a scar. This is the scar of unconsolability. There's something about what happened to us that's unconsolable. And no matter how much of this grief work that we do, which I will describe in detail, it can never erase the fact of what happened and the fact that some of what occurred can't be erased. It remains in us ineradicably. And this unconsolability is familiar because we remember feeling this in childhood. We remember that there were some hurts that our parents could not speak to, could not heal for us. I thought of this metaphor of the scar, and on my knee, I have two ugly scars from when I was a child in the 50s, and I bashed my knee into the metal scooter I was riding against a pole, and my mother took me to the emergency room. And now, when I look at this scar, it's really ugly because it's a scar from someone with the skills of the 50s. Okay? That's all he had to work with. Not to mention just anybody that was in the emergency room at that moment. I compared that to a scar that I have right under my chin when I fell off the bicycle here in Santa Barbara, maybe 5 years ago, it's hardly visible at all. But there is you can tell that there is a slight scar there. But the visibility of the scar, the ugliness of the scar, is in direct proportion to the skill of the physicians who worked on them. So, the scars that we bring into our adult relationship will be as visible and as difficult to deal with, as sensitive, as, or shall we say, in proportion to the skill with which we do the grief work. But no matter how much skill you have, it can't erase the scar completely. So the work is first to address what hurt you, what was missing, how you were abused, how you were held too tightly or not enough in childhood, to take care of this as your personal work, and then to move on to a partner, to move on to a relationship with another adult, having already taken care of this issue of unmet needs. How different that is from the person who, not even aware of the need to grieve, figures to himself, I'll find a partner who will take care of the unmet needs of childhood. And of course, we don't do this consciously, but we ask of someone else what was supposed to be given to us by the original caregivers. And of course, you get into trouble because your partner is asking the same thing of you. So it goes both ways. But when we take care of some of our early business, even some of the early business, even that would be success. When we take care of some of the early business, then we go more cleanly into an adult intimate relationship. And real intimacy can happen because we present ourselves as people who have already paid attention to, addressed, processed, and in some way resolved the losses, the hurts, the unfulfilled needs of long ago. But simply to carry them over, that brings a freight onto the ship of intimacy that's much too heavy for a craft like that to carry successfully. So all of our course will be aimed toward finding out how to grieve intelligently and serenely so that we could let go of the burdens of the past, no longer seeking so desperately from the bodies of other people the psychic and spiritual fulfillments that can come only from the original instinctive parenting that was meant to happen between our parents and us, or failing that, the work that we did to heal the wounds. And you'll see that this is very touching and poignant work. It's a painful class to be in. It's a painful class to teach because as I speak in these general terms, there will be ghosts of your own past inside you that will start waking up when they hear my voice. They'll wake up and start talking to you about you. They'll say, he's talking about how good it felt to be over at Aunt Margaret's house. And it doesn't feel good like that to be at the house I'm in with my partner. So when you hear this voice inside yourself waking up, then it will be better to listen to it rather than to me. You could hear what I say on the tape. But the more important voice is the voice that comes from within you, because this is you finally listening to the part of you that is grieving and has grieved for so many years, which is your inner child. It's not as if we grow up and give up our childhood. It's that we still contain our entire history, and this little child that has so many needs, that's still waiting to get needs fulfilled, is not quite the same as the adult you that goes to work in the morning, that knows which newspaper to buy, that knows how to drive the car, that knows which foods are best for the body. That's not the same part of you that is still reeling with pain from what happened in early life, if it was painful. And sometimes the choice of a partner is made by the child, not made by the adult. So that's how problems begin. But we're here to look at those and see if there's anything we can do about them. So if you were loved and you were free to express feelings in childhood, then you're free to move on to adulthood and to adult intimacy unchained by the past. Relationships then will not be complex or confusing. They'll be very simple and very joyous. But if you're trying to get another adult to love you as you always wanted to be loved, but were not, if you're trying to take out on a partner the anger that you always felt toward your parents, but were unable or afraid to express, if you fear your partner in the same way that you feared your parents, then the kind of love, anger, and fear that you bring into the relationship will be the childlike love, anger, and fear. They won't be able to find a resonance in a real adult. A real adult will push those away, say, no, that's not for me. That sounds like something from your past. Let's separate that out, because the kind of love I want is the love that an adult can give. The kind of anger I'm open to hearing is the anger about me, not anger that picks up and piggybacks from the past. And as far as fear goes, true love casts out fear. So we really need to work that through. But if, because so many things are still clouding your mind from what happened in the past, in unconscious and cellular ways, as I'll be describing, then it's well nigh impossible to have the healthy kind of relationship that you would like to have. But we're not going to be stopped by that. We're going to find a way. We're going to take these 10 weeks to look for a way to make this work, because I really think it's possible. And I have some tricks up my sleeve that will help you. So we're going to look closely at what happened in childhood. Sometimes it's too close for comfort, because we want this child inside finally to tell his story to you. You hear the child speaking to you. You find out what you really felt and what you really missed and what really happened and what you really had or didn't have. When you find that all out, you can let the story go once and for all. But as long as it's a secret, then it will never disappear, but will always be interfering with relationships. So our task will be to tune into this voice, and then, after articulating what must have happened and what we must have lost and how we must have felt, then we grieve wherever that hurt. We grieve the disappointments, the invasions, the betrayals, the abandonments, the terrors of the past, and we mourn for what we lost rather than seek it elsewhere. Could we have that kind of courage? Could we take this upon ourselves rather than implicating some innocent bystander in it? So the next time somebody asks you, how are you? Don't say fine. Say, I'm deeply grieving losses, the names of which I do not even know. Sometimes these ghosts that are inside you will wake up in the class, but they won't say anything. They'll say it later, that night, next week, next month. But sometime or other, they'll start talking, and that's when you really want to listen. And all through the class, I'm speaking to the conscious you, the adult you that's listening right now, but I'm also speaking to the unconscious part of you, I hope, to the Rip Van Winkle, the part of you that went to sleep long ago, that still thinks it's under the thumb of the king, that doesn't realize that something happened on July 4th, 1776, and that it's still happening. So I'll speak to that and to the Sleeping Beauty, the part that's really wonderful and is full of potential, but the potential is squelched because we're spending so much time on issues that need to be laid to rest. So if you feel as if, as I present some of this information, that it's kind of hard to hear, you may not be ready to hear it right now, I recommend dropping out. I recommend staying one more class than you can stand, and then drop out, because you may just need to come back next time I do it, and because not everybody's ready for the information at the same time. Okay. Also, at the end of each part of the presentation, I ask for questions, so you don't have to worry. I'll always come around to asking you if you have any questions. So let me just say a little bit more by way of introduction. I just want to kind of touch on some basic issues, and then we'll get into the material more directly. And I think it's really important to begin by saying that there are many awakened beings, many bodhisattvas, saints, angels, who are gathered around here because they are very attracted to people who really want to look more closely and to have more wisdom about themselves, and ultimately to be able to love more fruitfully and more tranquilly. So that yearning for enlightenment that we have right now, that desire to become healthy enough so that we could love effectively, is very appealing to those who have already experienced this, and they're here as assisting forces as we do this work. So I acknowledge them, and of course I'm speaking metaphorically, the metaphor of the advocate archetype that is present whenever we work on ourselves. And that's what this course is about. It's about how to work on yourself. And now I'm acknowledging the spiritual dimension of that. So, the opening question that I would begin this class with is very simple. It's, will I become an adult before I'm senile? Which one will happen first? Because it's okay with Mother Nature and it's okay with the evolution of this planet that we live our whole lives without waking up, without discovering and opening our true potential. And nothing gets in the way of your release of your lively energy and of the real potential inside you. Potential for what? Potential to love unconditionally and universally. Potential to have awakened in you and activated the wisdom of all the ages, and the ability to heal not only yourself but the world around you. These are the lively potentials of the spiritual self that are released when we do some of this psychological work. I see that as the ultimate goal, the release of this love, wisdom, and healing. So as part of this, we very humbly begin by saying that I have to accept the fact that there are some parts of myself that will never recover that I have to accept that there might always be spaces, black holes inside me, that I find impossible to bridge. That there might be some experiences that were so overwhelming that I might never really look at them completely. All I can do is the best I can. So I take these bite-sized pieces, which is what our class is about. Each week we try to present some bite-sized part of the work. And we do this a little at a time so that gradually every cell in our body, which in childhood was informed and very aware of the peril to our full flowering as unique individuals, from a setting that demanded we follow their rules, every cell in our body that experienced that now needs to be reassured that such a reign of terror is over and that we're free to be who we really are. So some of these experiences that we'll be talking about are in the cells of our body, not in our linear memory. Some of these are pre-reflective experiences before we were able to think logically, in other words. Imagine that. Some pre-reflective experiences are now directing and organizing your present life. You see the danger we're in. Imagine that. Instead of making choices, because how do you know who you really are? The way to know who you really are is very simple. It's to live in accord with your deepest needs and wishes. I articulate my deepest needs and wishes. I get to know my deepest needs and wishes. I know them. And then, once I know them, I live in accord with them. I live them out. I know and live my deepest needs and wishes. That's how I know who I am. What if, from the very beginning, there was a taboo against knowing your deepest needs and wishes and against living them out? Instead, the message was, here are our deepest needs and wishes which you have to fulfill, or which you have to imitate, or which you have to make yours. It's something like the old joke of, I date myself by mentioning Mutt and Jeff, a cartoon from the past. And in this cartoon, someone had adopted a baby who was French, and he was studying French so that he would know how to communicate once the baby started talking. But in a way, there's something about that does make sense. Because our parents weren't standing by sometimes, maybe not, maybe they weren't standing by, waiting to find out what are David's deepest needs and wishes. How could we know them with him? How could we know them together? And how could we help him live them out? Were they standing by waiting like that to find that out? Or were they waiting to impose on me what they thought was for my best good, but turned out to be their version of reality? So if all this happened before I could even reflect and know the difference, before I could even say no to this type of intrusion on my mental space, what if that part of me is now directing what I do in my adult life or what I do in intimate relationships? See, it's not as if there's something wrong with us. It's just how we humans are constructed. I'll talk later, probably in the next class, about the specific place in the brain that is developed early. It's the place in the brain where you can fear, where you can be conditioned by someone else's behavior, where feelings happen. That will develop fully in the infant way before the development of the ability to discriminate. This is good for me, that's not good for me. Accept this, don't accept that. See, we were just an open door, and so we have a cellular set of experiences that we're still operating out of. And this is just how we're constructed. We'll be talking about traumatic events. We'll be talking about crises that most of us felt from early life. And our basic point here is that what happened is still happening. What happened in the past didn't just end there. It just goes on. It just keeps happening because it's stored somewhere in our very bodies, and it's unreachable by the intellect. So here we give an example. Let's say in early life, your father left and never returned, and you loved him very deeply. You don't remember this in your linear memory, but your mother tells you, oh, you loved him very deeply, and when he left, you always said, I want my daddy. And I had to keep saying, he's not here, and so forth. But this loss is indelibly recorded in all the cells of your body, and somehow is associated, the strength of the loss is associated with the strength of the love. So here I have love of my father and loss of my father happening at the same time. I could connect cellularly in my mind now, in my whole psyche, love of someone with the fear of loss of someone. Since love and loss happened together originally, they go on happening together. So now it works in reverse. Well, not in reverse, actually. It's the same as before. First I loved him, then I lost him. Now I imagine, if I love him, I will lose him. Result, fear of abandonment. The deepest of all the fears having to do with intimacy. So this is what I mean by what happened is still happening. But as Heidegger said, the dreadful has already happened. What could be more dreadful than being an infant, no control, no understanding of what happened? All of a sudden, he's just gone. And imagine how you would feel, and nothing to do with the feelings. At least as an adult, when someone goes, you can tell all your friends what a terrible person he was, you can have a messy divorce, you can go to therapy, etc. But what could you do at 2? Nothing. So somehow the love and the loss got connected, and you're left with this fear of abandonment. It's an irrational fear, because if I really love someone, I'll lose him. Or it could even take the form of, if I really love my job, I'll lose my job. If I really love my car, I might have an accident. See how it'll carry over? But don't worry, I have a way to get to this. So our experience of love has been indelibly stamped with the possibility or even actuality of loss and abandonment. And the irrational nature of it now, for instance, if I say to myself, well, since I love my job so much, I know I'm going to be fired. Well, I know that there's something about that that's irrational. That irrationality is a clue that this connection between love and loss must go back to a pre-reflective time, a time in which I had no way of understanding and discriminating, no way of making distinctions, and it has a bodily resonance now, and all of these are clues that it must come from my past. So now in any panic or crisis, I'll notice that I might automatically revert to my worst fear. I'm going to lose everything. And it's a disabling belief. In other words, you feel powerless over the fear. That's another way, the third way, to tell that it's from childhood. Bodily resonance, you feel powerless over it. and it's irrational. When those three come together, you know it must have something to do with the past. So you look into your childhood, and whom did I love that I also lost, who was taken away from me in an untimely and unexpected way, without an explanation? See, our adult self would just dismiss the irrational fear, and then we'd feel powerful. But the child part doesn't know how to do that. So I'm always going to be paying attention to this child part of myself, where all the fears still remain in their original form. And I'm going to scan my body and notice where I hold this fear. And if I hold it here in my stomach, then whenever I feel it, I will place my hand over it in a gentle way, and I will take my deep breaths, and I will say some affirmation like, I stay with my fear, I allow myself to feel this, I let go of my fear, I let it be okay to feel this fear. Those kinds of statements that legitimate the feeling. And what you're doing, in effect, is finally giving to the little 2-year-old who lost daddy and was with mother helpless to help him through that. You're finally attending to that unattended infant that remains inside. And once you attend to him or her and reassure him or her that now there's an adult who does understand you and can mirror your pain and will take care of you, when that happens, you feel it a little bit less powerfully than you did before. And just a little progress, I consider complete freedom. Just a little progress, that's all you have to do. That's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Just a little progress in the freedom from fear is freedom from fear. Wonderfully encouraging. So we've been imprinted with stress, anxiety, uneasiness that manifests in our bodies and how we hold ourselves, for instance, in our sense of who we are, in our lack of self-esteem, in our way of moving, in our sense of our masculinity or femininity. These are all the vulnerable places in us that were assaulted by events too big for such a little being. And there really was no one who knew how to take care of that for us so that it wouldn't leave these indelible scars. Just as when I went to the hospital in the 50s, there was nobody there who knew how to close up this wound so that now there wouldn't be such an ugly scar. Instead, we designed the strategies of a lifetime from the impact of our injuries. And I'm acting toward you, the person that I love, as if you were the one who hurt me so much. And now my work is to untangle that part of myself, to undo that knot that keeps me tied to the past, and conscientiously make myself kindlier toward my own pain and release myself from having to inflict it on anyone else. So this is why the work leads to more love, because it's an acknowledgement that there's something unloved in me, and there's some way that I have of being that's unlovable and unloving towards you. And I want to untangle all that so that I could love effectively. Now, you may say to yourself, oh my God, why am I hearing all this now? I should have heard this 10 years ago. You might not have been ready then. I mean, you're here now. Maybe this is synchronicity, that you happen to come in here tonight. Maybe you're here because it's time to look. And you look back at all the years that you were so unconscious, all the years when you made so many mistakes, and you think, oh, what a loss. But what if that was not wasted time? What if that was incubation for healing? What if that was hibernation for the spring that was to come? Yes is right. See, there's always a way of looking at it that makes us feel a little better, makes us feel as if, well, maybe there's something I can salvage here. Just as after your house burns down, you walk through the rubble and you look for the diamonds that haven't been destroyed because they can't be. They can be buried and hidden in the rubble, but not destroyed. So the diamond self that's described in the Bhagavad Gita, the ultimate meaning of our life, which is love, wisdom, and healing, that was not destroyed by anyone. That still remains. And when we do this work, we somehow find a passage to it. So the challenge is to recover from the past, not to repeat it. But the little child inside wants both to recover and to repeat, and that's how our story becomes dramatic and anxiety-provoking. I think even the pain was part of the healing. And through this incubation or hibernation metaphor, we reframe unconsciousness, reframe sleep, to call it rest, to call it the preparation. Just as the Jews don't lament that it took 40 years to cross the desert from Egypt to the Promised Land. It takes what it takes. At least it wasn't 41 years. So there's a continuity in the story, our story, and there's something in us that wants to get better, that wants to believe this is possible. And I really think it is. And I've done this work on myself, so I'm sharing what I've experienced and what I've found with clients and so forth. Some of it could be completely wrong, but most of it is probably on target, somewhere on the target, not necessarily bullseye. Every once in a while I say something that is bullseye. So, what I compulsively seek in relationships but can't receive, that's the clue to what I did not receive in childhood. The needs that I can receive fulfillment for, some needs are fulfilled. For instance, I have a need for attention, and I notice that I'm satisfied with the amount of attention I receive. And as I look at all my relationships, I can tell that was never a problem. I never felt they weren't paying enough attention to me. So that's not my problem, attention. But I do have the feeling that they don't accept me as I am. I've always felt that my partners didn't really accept me, maybe didn't even like me. Can happen. So I look backwards now. The needs that seem to be fulfilled moderately and reasonably, no big deal, those are probably the ones that were fulfilled in childhood. Because with the fulfillment of the needs, just as with the loss came love, and with the love came loss, just as those two came together, something else came together. With the fulfillment of needs in early life came the installation. When the needs were fulfilled, at the same time, they installed in you a capacity to receive fulfillment later. In fact, even then. They installed the capacity. They installed the program in you to be able to have needs fulfilled. Two things happened. One, your needs were fulfilled. But there's a bonus prize to it. It's not just that your needs were fulfilled. While your needs were being fulfilled, you were also having installed in your psyche all the proper mechanics to be able to receive for the rest of your life that same fulfillment. So, the fulfillment of my need for attention I can say this happened from my parents. They certainly paid attention. So they fulfill the need for attention. While they fulfill the need for attention, at the same time, installed in me was the second benefit, the capacity to receive fulfillment of the need for attention from others. But if the need was not fulfilled, then two things happened. One, the need was not fulfilled, and two, a black hole, a void, a pit is created inside so that I can never get enough attention. The central pivot of our beginning work in this process, it's to see that some needs were fulfilled, and those are the ones that you can now easily receive from others in a moderate way. You're satisfied with the adult dose of attention, which is not full attention, but just some attention. You're satisfied with that. The fulfillment of the needs installed the possibility for satisfaction. So I can be fulfilled on the level of receiving attention because that original need was taken care of. If the need was not taken care of, then there's no possibility for satisfaction. Instead, I'm insatiable. So the early deprivation leads to insatiability. So now I go around looking for attention everywhere, and no matter how much attention I get, it doesn't fulfill me. In the same way that having a snack at night while watching TV doesn't fulfill. When the next ad comes on, I want another snack. This is why chocolate was invented. So what I compulsively seek now we're going backwards. So what I compulsively seek now and can never get enough of reveals to me, if I go in this inductive way, reveals to me what I must not have gotten enough from originally. What I can be satisfied with, what I can receive, tells me what I must have received enough of originally. Everybody follow? Okay. Any questions about this so far? Then I'm going to just mention what the specific needs are. The level of need varies. I'll mention like 4 basic needs so that we'll have something to work with. But you're right, it's unique to each person. And that's the nature of mirroring. And I'll give you, next time I'll give you a handout about mirroring so you could have more information about it, and I'll talk about it next time. Mirroring is the pleased and calm, unconditional acceptance that came from our parents that helped install this sense of okayness, power in the world, fulfillment. And when we bring that kind of powerful self into a relationship, we have a much better chance of succeeding than when we bring the needy self. But the need that was fulfilled leads to my having a normal need. The need that was not fulfilled leads to my having neediness. Neediness that can't be fulfilled. So when I go to someone as a needy person, I already know I haven't done my grief work. When you see someone that's very needy, don't say, well, you know, you're awfully needy. Say, I don't think you've done your grief work, because if you had, you wouldn't be so needy. Healthy people don't want someone who's needy. If you find someone that wants you when you're this way, you're really in trouble. Because a healthy person is going to run the other way. Or remember my rule of thumb. If on some enchanted evening you should see a stranger across the crowded room and know that's the one for me, I definitely go right up to that person and hand him your therapist's card. All right, is there another question about this? Very, very good. He says you might also say, instead of just I love my job so I may lose it, it could even be more neurotic and be if I love my job, I must lose it. I must do something to make myself lose it because I have to get this prophecy to be fulfilled. I have to make sure that it's a bad world out there, that everybody is an abandoner the way my father was. Yes, that could be our agenda. Imagine getting into a relationship with someone whose secret agenda, secret even from himself, is to make you leave him. But that's what you're up against when the work isn't done. So the long-lived and deep-rooted belief that there is someone out there who is just right for me, who will understand me perfectly, who will mirror me exactly as I need, is the central obstacle to enlightenment. That belief is the central block that's in the way of our waking up. If only we could let that go. Now let me restate it as an affirmation. I hereby let go of the long-lived and deep-rooted belief that there is anyone out there who is just right for me, or who will understand me perfectly, or mirror me exactly as I need. I let go of the belief that there is anyone who can fulfill me perfectly in any possible way. I mean, if you could divest yourself of hope to that extent, you have a chance. But if there's the shred of hope that there's somebody out there that can do it for me, then there's trouble in the henhouse. Because a predator fox will hear that hope and will prey on it. Even the sense that I belong with you, or I was with you in another life. I have to admit, I never got that bad that I said that one. That's another signal that this has something to do with a family scenario, because you're describing family. I belong with you. That's family. It takes work to want what's best. It takes work to have best wishes for ourselves. What are these best wishes? Your deepest needs and wishes. What are these deepest needs and wishes? Not the ones that weren't fulfilled, but the need to be done with that by grieving it and letting go of it. Then you become the resourceful adult who holds the defenseless child part of yourself. No longer scolding yourself for all the mistakes you've made. That's what the critical parent does. Instead, you're reassuring yourself and allowing yourself to feel what you feel as a nurturing parent. And the work is slow because we're trying to dismantle what it took many, many years to build up. So what accounts for the maldevelopment, I want to say this in passing, is not some one gross event that occurred. That was Freud's view, that only one terrible thing happened to us. Anybody could be that lucky. Just one thing happened, and that messed you up. There is no such thing as that. It isn't like that. It's the day in, day out whittling away of your psyche by people who don't believe you have a right to your deepest needs and wishes. That's what does it. It's the overall atmosphere, the feel of the place. A series of things, not just one thing. One thing you can recover from. You know, we think we want love and closeness, but love and closeness are the very things that revive the old hurts and losses, that bring back all the fears of abandonment. We think we want it, but when we start to receive it, it hurts. That's the hurt that's going into the past, the hurt that we never addressed, the hurt that we might vaguely remember, but have never quite attended to with healing love. When we have the experience of closeness, it brings up all the old stuff. And so The familiar hurts and disappointments of the past come back and face us, but they face us in the face of our partner. We think, this is the person who's making my life miserable. And it isn't really. That person is just a scarecrow that you've dressed in the clothes of your own past. Now, you only really want to love when you're willing to take all that love will bring. And what it brings is, as I say, the revival of this old material. So we do try to make the pain in the relating as adults a little more tolerable by becoming wrapped up in external concerns, in career, in children, in the expansion of the family, in practical concerns. Or we might use some unhealthy ways like having affairs, being combative, being more distancing. But it's all in reaction to what closeness brought in its train. Closeness is not just closeness. Sure, it feels good to be held and to be mirrored and so forth, but with that closeness come all the tales that go back to your original story. And we try to protect ourselves from feeling the archaic pain, but to choose to go through it and to resolve it is a choice for intimacy. Because if I take care of each of these tales that trail back to my childhood, all that will be left is unhurting closeness. Closeness that feels good all over. It's possible. It could happen. So under the normal facade of our daily life, where we look so adult, and we have all these poses that we are able to project successfully, under the normal facade, with all its order and its functionality, there may be a hidden lake of troubled waters. For some, the lake is not so troubled. It's like Lake Emerald in Connecticut. Just a beautiful green lake surrounded by those wonderful pine trees. And when you go down to the bottom of it, you just find a few Coke bottles. You might find Aunt Abigail's earring when she was here on a picnic in 1923. You might find a few artifacts left by the last of the Mohegans many decades ago, but nothing that would scare you. That's the kind of lake some people have inside. Lucky them. Then there are some who have Lake Tahoe. It's very vast. It's very beautiful too, but it holds secrets of pain and crime. The gun that killed Guido is down there, and so is Guido. Many scary things are down there, frightening things, suicides. Yes, there were parts of ourselves that committed suicide, that went down to the bottom of Tahoe, never to come back. And then, even more unfortunately, there are some who have a lake inside, mysterious, dark, holding something so terrifying, it seems better not even to look. Its name alone reveals Loch Ness. So if your life is full of compulsions and inner pain, if no relationship has ever worked, it's worth getting to the bottom of your lake and dredging it for its secrets so that you can be done with them. Because somewhere down there may be something that gives you a clue or that helps you be done with this once and for all. But if your life is basically happy and things are working very well, things are working out, it may be better to leave well enough alone. Not every arrowhead of the Mohegans has to be found. Let them stay there. So if your life is messed up, but you're too fragile right now to look that closely, wait. Work when it's easier to work. Wait until you're ready. Just stay out of relationship in the meantime. The Loch Ness Monster doesn't have to be disturbed, and he certainly isn't disturbing anybody if you just let him lie. But eventually, you might want to take a look. Now, I just want to mention quickly that not all of the difficulties of our life are related to our past. And in our other class, we talked about this, so I won't go into it in detail. When you notice that something isn't working for you, try to see what it is, S-E-E. It could be your shadow side, the part of you that you can't face. This is the Loch Ness Monster locked inside. This is the disowned part of us, which could be both positive or negative. We won't spend time on that because that's a separate course. Or it could be the early stuff that we're describing in this class. Our subject is this central E for this class. Or it could be that good old-fashioned ego. It could be when you have a strong reaction to closeness, for instance, or you have a strong proclivity in yourself toward anger, toward violence, that it isn't all related to early stuff. It could be that that's part of your own shadow side, the darker side of you, that was in you from the beginning, that wasn't placed there by parents. This is an archetypal reality that we all carry inside us. If you look at it this way, it isn't quite that Hitler led people to do the hateful things that they finally did. It could be that having denied their own shadow, they deputed him to act out their deepest shadow needs and wishes. They said, here's somebody crazy enough to do it, so let's give him the power to do it for us. It could be like that. So there's a shadow side, there's early material, and then there's the ego. By ego, I am referring here to that arrogance part of us that wants to be in full control of others and believes itself entitled to complete need fulfillment by everyone. Yes, there are people like that. So, what are these original needs? And they're easy to remember, just 4 A's. The first one we already know is attention. The second is acceptance, affection, and allowing you to live in accord with your deepest needs and wishes. To accept you as you are, that's accepting you essentially. To allow you is to allow existentially. Existential means what you live out in the here and now, day by day world. Essential is that which always remained in you. So they accept you essentially for who you are, and they allow you to act it out. In addition to that, they, your parents, pay attention to you and show non-sexual affection, but physical affection. Now, here's the interesting thing. And this one just occurred to me today. I was actually on my bicycle, and I was thinking about this class, and I was thinking about these 4 needs, when something new occurred to me that I had never thought of. So I would like to share it. I suddenly noticed that these 4, which are our basic early needs in life, the fulfillment of which make it possible for us eventually to be healthy adults, are also, in addition to being our early needs, this I knew before, they are also the characteristics of true intimacy, because in true intimacy, I pay attention to you, I accept you as you are, I show affection to you, and I allow you to be who you are out there in the world. And you do the same for me, and that giving and receiving, the exchange, without a hitch, without conflict, I can allow you, I can receive from you I can allow you to give these to me, and I can give them to you. That's intimacy. But today I thought of yet one more part of this. How fascinating that if you demand attention, demand acceptance, demand affection, and demand the allowing, that's the ego. The central obstacle to intimacy. Because ego is narcissistic, taking care only of itself, whereas intimacy is an exchange, it's mutual. The narcissist is incapable of such mutuality. So look, it's the very same four needs that, when they're given and received, become intimacy. When they're related to childhood, become the faces of our early needs. And when they turn into demands upon others, express our arrogant ego. Isn't that interesting? It all comes together. Because, of course, it's not a very long step from attention, acceptance, affection, allowing, to put those four together and to say, that's what love is. When someone attends to me, accepts me, shows me affection, and allows me to be myself in an unconditional way, that person loves me. If your needs were not fulfilled, then you might imagine that the person loves you when he is dramatically clinging to you or pushing you away, if that's your need, if that's what you're trying to reenact from childhood. But look, if you feel loved when someone pays attention to you, accepts you, shows affection, and allows you to be yourself, isn't that a healthier version of it than the version that looks like you fleeing while the other pursues, or you pursuing while the other flees? See my point? Okay, questions about this? Or any of this? Yes. Desire to make a needy person happy, a sign of compulsive behavior? No. But the desire to make a needy person happy leads us to that other subject, which is pity. Let me give a simple example. Let's say in childhood your mother was always sickly, and you felt pity for her because she was that way. But at the same time, you did love your mother, right? So what might have happened? Somewhere in your psyche, a connection happens between pity and love so that you can hardly tell the difference. Along comes someone whom you pity, but you think you love that person. Because for you, pity and love were never distinguished. They were never separated out. No one ever said, look, this is pity, that's love. They're not the same, because they aren't the same. So instead, you connect these two. So now you see someone who's very needy and you have pity for that person. That's the one you invite to the prom. The one that looks the most needy, the one that looks like nobody's going to invite her or him. And somehow you think, well, I'm being a loving person. But that's not the compassion of the Buddha. Because the compassion of the Buddha is teaching you how to fish. It's not just fishing for you. So I wouldn't make that connection. But when you opened up your book, it reminded me of one other thing I forgot to mention, which is that I recommend you keep a journal during this course and bring it here, and jot things down during these talks, because you will want to work on this material on your own, and a journal is a helpful way to do it. Okay, another question. Yes. You mean between acceptance and allowing? If your partner really knows you, what does it mean really to know someone? First of all, the path to knowing someone is attention to that person, acceptance of that person, affection for that person, because only love lets us see rightly, and allowing that person to be who he or she is. That's the same as really knowing someone. And the meaning of who I am, the object of the knowing, is the deepest needs and wishes. So when I allow someone to go out there and be who he is and act the way he wants to act, I notice what his deepest needs and wishes are. If I see him out there fishing, I know that he has a love of fishing and that that's part of who he is. If I see him out there gambling, if I see him taking off for Las Vegas, I have a different knowledge about that person than if I notice in his free time he goes up to the monastery to meditate. These are two different guys, aren't they? Because they have different needs and wishes, and so I would get to know them in different ways. But if I accept this person who loves to go to Las Vegas, okay, that's his form of having fun, no big deal. It's not as if he spends all the money. He just has a certain amount that he plays around with and he comes home. If I can accept that, it's not addictive, it doesn't seem to get in the way of anything, no big deal. That's what I mean by allowing the person to act on his deepest needs and wishes. Did I make the... Okay. See me after and show me in your notes. Somebody else had a question? Yes. How do you tell the difference between the healthy love looks the same as... Yes. No, it doesn't look the same. The healthy love is an exchange in which I offer unconditional but yet moderate attention, affection, and so forth, and you receive the attention, acceptance, and so forth, and are satisfied with the moderate amount. Very happy that it's unconditional. That's what it looks like when it's healthy. When it's unhealthy, no matter how much of the attention, acceptance, and so forth I pour in, it never seems to be enough. There always has to be more. That's how you can tell that an early need has been revived that was never fulfilled, and that isn't being attended to now. So that's one way to tell the difference. Or it's someone who can't receive it at all. It's someone who can't stand the attention, pushes you away when you offer real attention, because he can't handle it, he can't let it in. So either it's I can't get enough, or even a moderate amount is too much, or I can't give it back. That's the narcissistic style. That is the difference. And notice in the original way I described it, it has such a serene feeling, as the feeling that, okay, it's not that big a deal. Use as an example your physical needs. You have a need for food, you have a need for shelter, you have a need for warmth or coolness, you have a need for hygiene, cleanliness. And if these needs were fulfilled originally in a healthy, moderate, and regular way, you now trust the world to provide those things for you, and you know that you can provide them for yourself. So you look for arrangements in which you're able to feed yourself, clothe yourself, keep yourself tidy and hygienic and so forth, and see the paradox. What you were given healthily, you are now able to give to yourself. So now I can feed myself because they originally fed me. But if you were deprived in some of those areas, you might now have terrible compulsions about any of those things, or you might have arranged so that you could be homeless because you just won't or can't or have not to give are forced not to give yourself the fulfillment of what you originally missed. That's one possibility. And the other, of course, is, and even worse, you could make food symbolic of attention or acceptance or affection, and then look for food as a substitute for drugs or alcohol, etc., as a substitute for these original ones. That would be another way to tell that the early needs were not fulfilled. Okay, let's just have one last question, and then we'll go into, I'll talk about approval and appreciation next time when I go into detail about each of these to show how each of these works and what happened to each one of these when we became adults. what it turned into. But approval and appreciation are things that I'll address in detail. Remember that the people who were fulfilling these needs were the ones we depended upon for our physical survival. That's why the material is encoded in such a long-lasting way. It's not as if this was just a candy bar, something extra. It wasn't like that. The people who were holding the keys, the 4 A's, were the same ones who could decide whether you would live or die. And when you hear yourself in a relationship saying, without him I can't survive, can't live if living is without you. See, I do know one song from the 90s. When you hear yourself saying that, you know something's wrong. Okay, well, I would like to share this wonderful poem, which I found in the New Yorker. This is by Stanley Kunitz. This man is 91 years old. This poem was written when he was 90, last year. Now, the little background. When he was a child, his father committed suicide, and he was brought up with his mother and his sisters. He became a modern poet, well known, a very good poet, as you will soon see. But in many of the poems, he goes back to this loss of father theme. I chose this poem because it relates to the statements that I made earlier. A lifelong wound that always remains in some way unconsoled, no matter how much work we do on ourselves, no matter how successful we've been. There's something that hangs on in such a poignant, touching way. The poem is called Halley's Comet, which, as you may or may not know, appeared in 1910. Miss Murphy in first grade wrote its name in chalk across the board and told us it was roaring down the storm tracks of the Milky Way at frightful speed. And if it wandered off its course and smashed into the earth, there'd be no school tomorrow. A red-bearded preacher from the hills with a wild look in his eyes stood in the public square at the playground's edge, proclaiming he was sent by God to save every one of us, even the little children. Repent, ye sinners, he shouted, waving his hand-lettered sign. At supper, I felt sad to think that it was probably the last meal I'd share with my mother and my sisters. But I felt excited, too, and scarcely touched my plate. So Mother scolded me and sent me early to my room. The whole family's asleep now, except for me. They never heard me steal into the stairwell hall and climb the ladder to the fresh night air. Look for me, Father, on the roof of the red brick building at the foot of Green Street. That's where we live, you know, on the top floor. I'm the boy in the white flannel gown, sprawled on this coarse gravel bed, searching the starry sky, waiting for the world to end. Thank you.